Hi, we're live. Hi, welcome everyone who has come to date night at Loyalty Books. This is our first event. My dates tonight are the wonderful Rebekah Weatherspoon,
Hi.
Mia Sosa, and Sharina
Hi.
Harris.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, we're so happy that you all joined us. And hopefully we were just checking that there were no inappropriate things in the background. That's why we were a little bit late. Clearing background is incriminating. But now we're ready to go. If there are any technical difficulties, we will try to fix them and come back, but hopefully things will go smoothly, knock on wood. And all right, so we're going to get started. So first, I would like to say thanks to Hannah and Loyalty Books for hosting this event. Loyalty has been a great place for romance. It's a very supportive indie bookstore, supportive of romance. I've had one event there with Mia. That was one of my favorite events where the electricity went out right before our event.
Yep.
And
we made fans for
yes.
we made fans for our guests. So
And had the
paper
event in
fans.
the dark, and it was fun. It was great.
It was.
And hopefully that won't happen now because it wouldn't work out the same way. But so Loyalty
No, it
Books,
wouldn't.
Loyalty Bookstore is a really great indie among many great romance-friendly indies, and we're really happy that they are hosting us today. So I'm going to give a more professional introduction of our dates tonight. Our first date, Mia Sosa, writes funny, flirty, and moderately steamy contemporary romances that celebrate our multicultural world. A graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and Yale Law School, Mia practiced First Amendment and media and law in the nation's capital for 10 years before trading her suits for loungewear, read sweatpants. Born and raised in East Harlem, New York,
Definitely.
she now lives in Maryland with her college sweetheart, their two bookaholic daughters, and one dog that rules them all. Welcome to Mia.
Hey
Uh,
everybody.
Sharina Harris earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from Georgia State University. After college, she pursued a career in digital marketing and public relations. Although her profession required writing, she decided oh, sorry, my phone is like the very tiny iPhone still. So, like, although her profession required writing, she decided to pursue a career in writing in 2012. Sharina's contemporary romance series under the pen name Rena Gray was named Book Riot's 100 must-read romantic comedies. When Sharina is not writing, she can be found with her head stuck in a book, yelling for her favorite NBA teams, and spending time with friends and family. Sharina resides in Atlanta with her husband and son. And Rebekah, after years of meddling in her friends' love lives, Rebekah Weatherspoon turned to writing romance to get her fix. Raised in southern New Hampshire, Rebekah Weatherspoon now lives in Southern California, where she will remain forever because she hates moving. So, welcome, ladies. First of all, I'm going to have each of you talk about your latest release. Mia and Rebekah, I believe that your books came out in February, and Sharina's book came out just this past Tuesday. So it's release week for you.
Woo-hoo.
Yay!
Yay!
Cheers.
Thank you.
So, Sharina, since your book came out this week, why don't you talk a little bit about Imperfectly Happy?
Yes, thank you. Look at that. Yay. Okay. So, imperfectly happy or I'm perfectly happy just depends on if you're a glass half empty or half full. I always say imperfectly. But it's a story about four friends from college. They formed a mastermind group, which is basically like a accountability support group in which they followed their dreams. About 12 years later, they haven't pursued their dreams and they're just really unfulfilled with their lives. So they decide to restart the mastermind group and just relentlessly go after their dreams. And of course, they're no longer unattached college students, so they have to balance home life. One of them is a mother, wife, and things of that nature. So they decide, hey, self-care, I'm going to drop everyone else's baggage and I'm going to focus on me. So if you're a fan of friendships and with romance, I think you me enjoying this book. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Rebekah, do you want to talk a little bit about A Cowboy to Remember?
Sure. At my book release in February, I completely forgot to tell the whole room what my book was actually about. So half the people in the audience were like, what are you talking about? The super short elevator pitch is that it's a Cowboy to Remember is a Sleeping Beauty Western retelling. Oh, look, Mia's got it in here.
Hey.
Yeah.
It's a Sleeping Beauty retelling set in the fictional town of Charming, California, at a Black-owned luxury ranch. So that's it.
Thank you. And Mia, can you tell us a bit about The Worst Best Man?
Yes, I have it too. Okay. So I have many copies. So The Worst Best Man is the story of Carolina Santos, who is a Brazilian American wedding planner in Washington, D.C., who at the beginning of the story is left at the altar and is informed of the fact that she is being left at the altar by her fiance's younger brother. Fast forward 3 years, and she is still a successful wedding planner and has the opportunity of a lifetime, basically to pitch a hotel executive who is looking for a wedding coordinator for the hotel. And she has to do the pitch with, you guessed it, the younger brother of her former fiance. And shenanigans ensue. And spoiler alert, they live happily ever after.
Okay, thank you for that. So, since you're already talking about that, can you talk a little bit about writing? And as far as tropes go, we often get like brother's best friend. How difficult was it for you writing brother's little brother? How like the logistics of that and making it work in a believable way, which you did, must have been like a little difficult. But can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So I think what I usually do when I write books is I try as much as possible to come up with the blurb. I kind of just want to get a sense of, does this story work on that kind of like the level where people listen to what it is that this book is supposed to be about and then go, that sounds interesting. And I knew I wanted it to be enemies to lovers. And I added this element, which was that they were actually going to be related, and she had already dated his older brother. And when I was writing the blurb, I was like, this is going to be great. And then when I was writing it, I was like, what the hell did I do? Like, I just boxed myself into a corner. And so I think once I realized, like, even just me as a reader responding to that, I kind of kept that in mind throughout, sort of where wouldn't I want to go? Certainly, I didn't even want there to be a discussion, which I'm sure some people thought of as they read it, but I didn't want it to be in the book, of the fact that, she had been with his older brother. I wanted to basically create a story where the connection between Lena and Max was so strong that people could forget about the fact that that brother had been part of her life. And I wanted to make clear at the very beginning that he was not the right man for her. And like, you should have known that in the first chapter. And you certainly learn it throughout the story. And I think that made it easier. So I definitely approached it as Andrew, the older brother, had to be a jerk. Like, nobody was gonna like this guy. And I think that made it easier to sell the fact that she found the person, and it just so happened to be his younger brother. I think. I think it worked.
I think it worked, and it also worked because it wasn't like they were like hanging out all the time or something like that. It was
right.
Yeah. But I thought it worked well, and as you're reading it, you're like, yeah, the other guy sucked. Why would she be with him?
Right.
But
Exactly.
in a believable way. And hey, look,
Right.
we know that happens in reality, so we're not just on
Exactly.
but speaking of, difficulties writing, Sharina, so you wrote romance before, which usually focuses on one couple. And in Perfectly Happy, you have four friends. And as you said, they all have a whole lot of things going on in their lives. All of these different relationships, hopes, dreams. So it was kind of like four romance novels squashed into one.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about like how you managed to pull that off and do it so well? Because it really is a juggling act that you had to do in this book. And how is it different from writing romance?
Oh man, it was so different. I think with the reason why I pursued this book in particular, I saw these things happening with my friends of us being a little dissatisfied and just going down the regular path, and I connected with each character. I thought, yeah, this person could have their own book, but I wanted that just the different point of views and the messiness of it, and then like the friendship aspect of it too. So I definitely look towards like multiple POV stories, just really dissecting, in particular, Terry McMillan's Waiting to Excel, just making sure that those stories were making sure that the stories are interconnected in a way, and making sure that I showed the dynamics of the friendship, and then also, and now the book is escaping me right now. Amy, Amy Tan, Joy Luck,
Yeah, the
Joy
Joy
Luck
Luck
Club.
Club.
Yes,
Yeah,
Joy Luck
Charlotte
Club.
Club.
So, dissecting how, definitely a different vibe, but just how she did eight, if I'm not mistaken, 8 point of views. So I was like, all right, we're going to figure it out. So I wanted to show like that. I just wanted to be a little messy. Well, so that was the inspiration behind that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love it, and I love how you kind of really captured something that is an overlap in romance and in women's fiction, which is kind of the protagonist trying to pursue coming into their own and trying to find their happily ever after. In women's fiction, it's not always romance, but it's finding that thing that makes them happy. But for four people and their family.
Yes.
Uh, so, Rebekah, I'm going to
Yes.
continue on the path of things that, as I was reading, I was like, wow, this must have been very difficult, and I'm really impressed with
Oh,
this.
oh.
Was how you wrote. So, in A Cowboy to Remember, it's an amnesia trope along with Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
But the way you described the memory loss and really went into detail, can you talk a bit more? Can you talk a bit about how you went about portraying Evie's amnesia and memory loss?
Um,
Um,
so finding people who've had complete retrograde amnesia is actually pretty hard. Doesn't happen to a lot of people. But I did a lot of research, and one place I looked was the best source for information ever, Reddit. Um, and this guy had gotten into an accident, and he did an AMA talking about how he had complete retrograde amnesia, which means you forget everything. So there's different kinds of amnesia. A lot of people suffer, actually, like everyone basically has some sort of amnesia, and a lot of your memories are just bits and pieces of stuff that your brain has held on to. But trauma-based amnesia is like actually very common, and it happens to you just forget stuff. Your brain's protecting you, that sort of thing. So it was interesting reading what he had to say. One of the interesting things he said was that his wife had to tell him he was white, and I thought that was really interesting. So coming from that point of view of, okay, I have this character, and not only has she kind of forgotten the events, she's forgotten her prom, or she's forgotten, the day she lost her parents, but she also doesn't have a concept of who she is. And I saw that as an opportunity to put her back in her hometown with the family that she grew up with, and they had to kind of be responsible for making her comfortable enough to start over again. So that seemed like a good place to kind of insert some quality people into her life.
Yes. And I did find that fascinating because, like you said, a lot of amnesia tropes, it's kind of like they forget one person or one specific part of their life. But Evie has forgotten like everything.
Yeah.
And she's a chef, so she's like, okay, what is this food? Like, what
Yeah.
is this thing? Okay, this food is good. Like, and it's like a thing that, of course, she's eaten 100 times.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I love that aspect of watching her relearning things that she loved or didn't love, or just remaking her way in the world.
It also gave me a chance to like not become a master chef because I was like, okay, do I either watch 700 episodes of Top Chef and learn how to cook literally everything, or do I give myself the shoes for her to like cook eggs 5 different ways? That people is called craft.
It was a great shortcut, and someone, Stephanie, has put nutmeg with exclamation points, and I did go and sniff my nutmeg after reading it.
Nutmeg smells amazing.
Um, so in Rebecca's book, in all of the books, there's really great comedic banter, but Mia, can we talk a bit about, so one of the things I really enjoyed about The Worst Best Man and your writing in general, is like your comedic timing and kind of just like, it's like,
It's a funny
yeah,
book, Mia. It's funny.
it's funny,
Thank you.
but I'm a writer, I use words. But your comedic, like the banter, and like just really the rhythm of it is like so, like I felt like I was watching a romantic comedy. So my question is, do you particularly work on the craft of comedy? Does it come naturally to you? Have you ever been a stand-up comedian in your life?
Definitely not.
Um, can you talk a little bit about how you write
Yeah.
comedy into your?
So I've said this before on panels, which is there's a question that people often ask, which is, do you work at writing funny? And I tell people I live funny and it makes it easier to write funny. I just happen to have, my husband is the source of much comedy in my life. My children are a source of much comedy in my life. And when I say that there are times when something is happening in my house and I jot it down because I'm like, this is going to find its way in a book, that is kind of what happens. And so I think just being around people, because I'm actually a pretty serious person. My mother thinks I'm way too serious. And I think it's being around people who are funny that has kind of loosened me up and made me see the fun in life. And so there have been times, like as an example, a pretty recent one, and I'm pretty sure I tweeted about this one. I was in the kitchen with my husband, and we were on opposite ends of the kitchen, and I was cleaning, like, I think it was carrots. There was like the bagged carrots, and you know how they say washed and ready to eat. And I said something like washed and ready to eat my ass. And I was saying it like washed and ready to eat my ass. Like I'm about to eat these. My husband, who's on the other side, like chopping vegetables, looks up at me and he's like, and I'm like, and I look at him and we have like this moment. And he's like, and I'm like, I did not mean it that way. And he's like, I didn't hear the comma. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that was another moment where I was like, this is going in the book. And it is in the book that I just turned in today. Because that's kind of how it happens. Like, there's just funny things that happen in my life and I jot them down. The thing that I try and do is kind of, I like turns of phrases. I like to twist things around. I describe Max in the book as having big lick energy, when people and Carolina has like stream of consciousness. And it's just stuff that I just kind of like, I don't know where it comes from. Like I just play around with words and I'm like, this is actually funny. And I write it down. So, I think a lot of their banter is sort of very reflective of kind of how I interact with my own husband. So that's that.
Thank you for that. I'm still thinking about I lost in writing my ad. Okay. But on that note, Rebekah, this is not an ass eating related question.
I mean, you can ask me that if you want to.
I know. But no, this question is about banter and in your book. Like, so your book also has a large ensemble cast.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like really rooting the reader and this family. It's a multi-generational family, and like the people at the ranch and Evie's assistants. And can you talk a bit about like how you work with banter in your book, or how banter flows for you? Is it? I mean, I know you, but for people who don't know you, can you talk a little bit about like how you write those scenes, or kind of what kind of banter you appreciate in your books?
I mean, I think like Mia, like I come from like a very funny, very joking family. My family is very, very funny and always had jokes. And my dad is kind of like the king of dad jokes, but like corny black dad jokes. And also, like I grew up in a really white town, so I think like one way that my parents kind of like grounded us was like kind of having a lot of family inside jokes. So like it felt like, okay, maybe the world feels a little uncomfortable and maybe this town is a little uncomfortable for us, but when we're together and we're home, it's all going to be laughs, it's all going to be joy. So I think that kind of, I try to incorporate that into the conversations, especially with the family. And I also think just me personally, like when I'm with my friends, I find that like humor is kind of like the best way to like literally turn a frown upside down. Like when someone's having a horrible day, if you can insert like a perfectly inappropriate joke, like it's a good way to like distract them just for a moment. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that in a way is like maybe my superpower, to be able to like make people laugh in like the worst moments and just take their mind off of things. So I like to just include that, and I write a lot of friendships in a lot of my books too. So I always like to have at least like one friend who's there to like cheer that person up, or and they get that, that's reciprocated. But just I think humor is like the best medicine, and I think it would feel weird if I didn't inject that into my dialogue.
Thank you. Sharina, so in your book, I want to go back to something you talked about because I find it interesting, particularly in this moment of, these four friends who had these hopes and dreams and kind of have this moment where they realize, in the book, Raina says, we're living scared, like at the moment when they decide to go for their goals, or decide and are a little bit, group herded into going for their goals again. So can you talk a little bit about that? Do you feel that it was women's fiction it was easier for you to write about this particular thing? And also, is this something that has gotten a particular response from readers for you, or who have read the book? Because it feels like something that I think, especially right now in this kind of like turmoil going on in the world, a lot of people are starting to think about like what they are doing with their lives. So this is kind of a great book for this moment. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions you asked about, how the readers are responding. So it did just come out on the 28th, but I did get the loveliest message on Instagram from someone who just happened to pick up the book. She was on a road trip. My first question was like, go inside. But but I appreciate it. Thank you for buying my book. But but she was saying how it was very inspirational for her, and she was just glad. It seemed like um, she was just destined to find that book and see that book randomly, and how it really motivated her. Yeah, I think this is a time for some people, right? Who can, we're in a
Yeah.
different mindsets for sure. I want to respect that.
Yeah.
But certainly for introspection of, just really understanding that life is short, so to speak. So really going after your dreams. And that's something I had that moment about 10 years ago. I didn't do anything about it, but I had that moment 10 years ago. And then so this book was like the manifestation of like my fears. And before I wrote this book, I didn't have a kid. I have a 2-year-old now. So one of my characters, who's a musician, and she has 2 little ones, and she was just trying to figure out how to do both. That was really the manifestation of like, how in the hell am I going to write, work full time and then have a kid? So I wanted this to be an inspiration. I don't know if I'm gonna continue down a women's fiction path, but for this particular subject, and how I wanted to present it with the 4 different points of views, and it focusing on the heroine's journey and their dreams, it just made sense for this particular genre. But I love romance. I will always go back to romance, so I had to have it in there. I'm like, no, we got to have some kissy moments. Yeah.
And also one thing that I thought was cool is like, for me as a romance reader, I really love seeing the different cool professions that heroines have. Can you talk a bit about the professions of the friend group and like what they're going for?
Yes. So first character, Raina, she is a radiotherapist. So if you're familiar with Delilah, she's that person. So she's giving advice. She has no business giving the advice, by the way. Uh, she's a hot mess. Like, how are you going to give someone blind leading the blind? But she has this persona. And she's taken on like the Southern grandmother, like, oh baby, just do this, just very sweet. But really, she's sarcastic. She really just wants to tell them the truth, but she can't because she's in this persona, and it's that's what she's known for. So she actually wants to be a writer. And then we have Nikki. Nikki is a stay-at-home mom. She used to be a musician in a rock band, and she got pregnant, married early, and so she left music behind, and she's just not coping well with it, to say the least. And that manifests in some very unhealthy ways. And then Kara is a wine expert, and excuse my southern accents, but she's a sommelier. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly. Sorry, I try to practice.
You're good. You're
Whatever.
good.
Yes. Okay. And so there's this master, and if you've seen Uncorked, oh my God, it's so good. It's on Netflix. But there's a quartermaster's test, and it's like the pass rate is like less than 10%. No representation as far as like African American women. I thought, oh, this would be, as far as that level, this will be interesting. So she's failed the test a couple of times, and she's going to go for it again. But she struggled because she had a death in the family that really impacted her. And then finally, Sienna, she's an attorney, public defender, and she wants to run for city council, but her fiance wants to do it. So she steps back, supports her man, and she's just rethinking if her loyalty lies in the right places. So those are my ladies.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm looking at my little questions. So, Rebekah, one thing I wanted to talk about with you that I really enjoy in your books is the way your characters explore emotion, which something I enjoy in all of your books. But and A Cowboy to Remember, can you talk a bit about the emotional, how you went about writing the emotional link? Because for Evie, you even have two different sets of emotions. Her emotions when she has amnesia, and her emotions when she has her memories. So, and also the kind of complex familial things. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about writing emotion or exploring emotions in your characters? If that's too vague, I feel like that's a very
I mean, it's a
vague.
little vague.
Uh,
I will say that I spend like most of my time crying, so like dredging up emotion for books is like not that. But yeah, if you want me to be a little more specific,
I mean, yeah, I should have written a better question down, but it's hard to explain as a reader. I feel like you have a signature way that your characters express emotion that I find very comforting.
okay.
Um, but that's not a question. I guess I'm just complimenting you now.
No, I think I will say that someone asked me kind of a similar question a few years back about how I write sex scenes, and I think it's a similar thing in that I think first I start with the character and the situation that the character is in, right? So Evie is, and sure you'll get a kick out of this. I wrote her character because no black woman has ever won Top Chef, and that was like really driving me crazy. So I was like, let me write a black woman who's like won one of the like premier cooking competition shows and kind of start there. And so I was trying to craft someone who has risen to the top of her field, but risen to the top of her field on television. So the way she has to navigate dealing with white people and people who aren't black, people who aren't necessarily understanding where she's coming from, she has to. And Mia, I think your character Lena, she understands this as well. She has to push a lot of her emotions down. So even in the opening scenes of Cowboy to Remember, like she goes and hides in a stairwell so she can like get it together because she's about to start crying. So it's a lot of that is just what is this character? What do they need? What situation are they in? And how are they going to have to live in the body they're in and deal with those emotions? So, with Zach and his brothers, they're, black men in their 30s, but they have a ranch that's handed to them by their grandmother, but they also then have to prove themselves. They can't let the business go under. And as you'll see in book 3 as we go along, they're also kind of supporting their community. If you ever live in a small town and there's like one kind of big business that's in that small town, the ranch in theory employs like half the town, so there's a lot of people who are depending on them. So Zach's journey in the book involves realizing how much he needs to give to himself to grow as a man and a potential partner, and how much he's giving to his family and how much he's giving to the ranch. And not a spoiler alert, but kind of one of the reasons they had their initial falling out is because Zach was so focused on the ranch, and Evie's grandmother didn't want her to throw away her life dedicating her life to the ranch. She wanted Evie to go out and see the world, and that was kind of the catalyst for the first little dust up. But it all works out. Surprise! It's a happy.
And Mia, this is, I guess, kind of related to emotion, but one of the things I really appreciated and was like really impressed with as a reader and a writer while reading The Worst Best Man was how you took the enemies to lovers trope, and I felt like you just had like the perfect like tension of, because sometimes you read it and you're like, why would this person ever end up with that person, even if later on you believe it. um like I felt like it was just like the perfect tightrope of like, I really see why they don't like each other, in addition to him being the brother of the ex. Like, can you talk a little bit about, like, you talked about, that aspect of the family, but can you talk a little about writing enemies to lovers and, what you love about that trope and how you envisioned it for Max and Lena?
Yeah. So what I love about it is the tension, and I feel like this. If you have characters and you know where their arcs are going to be and what they need to realize by the end of the story, part of the fun of that journey, I think, is sort of slowly but surely chipping away at all of the reasons why they think they don't like each other. And it's a balance. Like, it's very hard to, do it convincingly. And even in this book, I mean, I think for marketing, like we say, it's enemies to lovers. I think it's more accurately like hate to love, and hate to love in more of the way of like, I don't want to love you, but I will, and I'll end up doing that. And so there's this tension, but you don't want it to be like mean tension. Like, you don't want them. And I think the way that it works is if the reader is convinced that these people are not mean at their core. Because I have read books that are enemies to lovers, and part of the thing that always makes me hesitate is this sense of like, I'm not sure that I like you as a person. And so I'm not sure that you two should end up together. And I think part of the challenge for every writer, if you're doing enemies to lovers, is for the reader to be convinced, like, even if they weren't a couple, you would like this person, And so when you bring them together and they're kind of working off each other and they're doing things to annoy each other, and they may say things that they wouldn't ordinarily say, you're still convinced that at their core, they're good people. And this is just the tension that is bringing all of this out of them. And I went through, when I was going through revisions, I wanted to be sure that there wasn't this point where somebody would say like, oh, you went too far. And I don't think that ever happened. Like, my goal was for people to sort of see them interact, see that they had this tension, see that they were kind of, it was more like needling. They were needling each other. But at the end, but there was always this undercurrent of like, I like you and I respect you as a person, but damn, like, you're making me angry right now. And I think that's kind of like the limit for me for enemies to lovers. I mean, I know that there are some authors who do it really well, and you're like convinced that these people like actually hate each other. I'm not sure, quite frankly, that I would be able to pull that off. I like my stories to be sort of happy and fun, and like I want there to be some emotion, but I don't want people. I'm not an angsty writer, never have been. I don't think I ever will be. And so for me, the important part was convince people that these two characters are really good at their core, and I think everything else flows from there.
I agree. So with that, the audience they've been putting questions in the Ask a Question box. So I'm going to look at some of the questions, because I do have some, my date night questions, but they might also overlap with what the audience wants to know too. So I'll look at theirs first. Okay, let's see. D, a question from D. Since I assume I'm not the only one turning to books for stress relief during this time, can you each name a recent favorite read and a throwback favorite, maybe one that helped mold you or your writing?
I'll go.
Yeah.
We just read The Worst Best Man by for Women of Color Romance Book Club. And
that's right.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar with our book club, we meet on Twitter, and we have like an international group, who's in our Patreon and everything. And so sometimes it's really hard for everyone to come because everyone's busy. But that was our biggest turnout in the calendar year. That was I think the last biggest turnout was last year for one of Alyssa's books. So it was really great that that many people turned up. I was afraid it was going to be me and Katie Tower, who I love, but it's just me and her talking about books.
I left Twitter, by the way, because I saw
Oh.
the tweet and I was like, I'm out.
That's like our number one rule. It's like, don't at the author, please. Leave them alone. But no, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the great things about the book, but it's so funny. It's so funny. And I think in this moment, that was definitely something that everyone needed. And I don't know, I've been having a hard time reading also kind of in the last year. Like I have so many books in my TBR and I keep starting books and I keep stopping books, and Max is like my favorite hero for a long time. I really liked him as a character. He was really likable. And I think that was something that stood out for me as I was reading. I was actually messaging my friends and I was like, this hero is like, I really like this hero a lot.
You do not know how much that means to me.
He was fantastic. It was a really good book, Mia. You did a really good job.
Thank you.
And I will say, a throwback. I'm like, what's a throwback? I'm like, Twilight's coming on Freeform tomorrow. What's a throw? I'm just kidding. I mean, I would have to say, oh man, this is really tough. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys kind of like a weird throwback because I feel like we're all like in similar wheelhouses, and I want to like step out of that similar wheelhouse. I don't even think this book's available in print, but I was talking to my roommate about it the other day. Do you guys remember Elizabeth Amber's Lords of Seder books? There were these like really funky paranormal romances that were put out by Kensington back in their Aphrodisia days. This is like a million years ago. And it's like, they're historicals, I think. I don't know. They're very weird. And it starts out with
I'm writing this down.
That are like satyr goat men who own a vineyard in Italy. And it's so weird. But it's so good. They're so good.
And amazing to me.
Yeah. Tackles, like, they end up with kind of like in like a magical love situation. So I think like in the first book, the woman is like a fairy. Like, it's so weird. The second book, my heroine is intersex, and I am not intersex, so obviously I can't speak to whether it nails the representation properly. What I will say about it is that she does get a very beautiful happy ending where she gets to be herself, and I thought that was great. I'm not sure if some of the descriptions in it would be triggering for some people, so please keep that in mind when you get to book 2 or 3. But I think there's like 5 or 7 books in this series, and it is absolutely bonkers, but like really good, fun, off the wall erotica.
Oh, I guess I can go next. I've been reading Dread Nation. So awesome. Forbidden Promises by Dread Nation, Justina Ireland. Forbidden Promises by Cynthia Williams, and Owner of a Broken Heart by Sharice Hodges. So those are like the last 3 books I've read. And throwback. I haven't had a chance to really. Nope, that's a lie. Kristen Ashley and Kristen Higgins. I've just been reading a few of their books, but I've been trying to get through my TBR and focus on writing, so I haven't spent much time to the throwbacks.
Mia?
Let's see. I was prepared for this question. Let's see. So the last book that I read and completed is Tracy Livesey's Sweet Talkin' Lover.
Yay!
Which is fabulous. It's basically small town romance, but with a multicultural cast, which I love. And there's a little bit of a story. I was helping Tracy. We were kind of talking plot-wise about this, so this kind of feels like a little close to my heart because I know the process she went through to finish this book. And it's basically about a marketing manager who goes to a small town in Virginia, and her role there is basically to shut down. Rebekah, you were talking about this. There is that one plant in the town that is basically the economic source of that town, and she's basically there to gather information to shut down that plant. And the hero is the mayor of that town, and so they obviously have this. They have competing goals, and it's just great tension, but also Tracy has this ability to talk about race and interracial relationships in a way that doesn't make it about the story, that kind of just I find very compelling. I want to talk about like the stuff that's on my TBR. I'll say that really quickly. Just because I feel like this, for all of the people who are on there, should see this cover.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
I saw that earlier today. Yeah.
Sharina Jackson.
Yes.
So
I was going to talk about.
I just turned in my book today, and this is the gift to myself. So I will be reading this tonight. I'm so excited. This cover, and I just can't wait. So that's on my TBR. And then throwback, I just read Loretta Chase, Lord of Scoundrels. I'm very late to the game. And I think it was Adriana Herrera who was talking about her own read of the book. And I was like, okay, like everybody has read this book. Has everybody read this book? I don't know. I have this feeling like I'm the only person who hasn't read this book.
I haven't read it.
Right. Okay, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna read the book, and it was quite good. And what I found interesting was that I'm not a big historical romance reader, so I was like, will it hold up? And I don't know how it was received at the time, but I was reading it and I was like, this is just a freaking good book. So that was something that I read recently, and my TBR is out of control. So I won't even try and tell you about all the books I still need to read.
Let's see. My recent reads. What have I turned in a book on Monday and was doing other things. So
Congratulations!
Yeah.
I'll drink to that.
But after I turned it in, I have so many arcs that are all things that I want to read so badly. But the one that I did start that I'm really loving is it's a YA actually called Legendborn by Tracy Deon, and it's like a secret Arthurian society in the South, and the heroine is a young Black girl in her first year of college, and her mom has died, and she thinks she knows what happened, but it turns out that it might be linked to the secret society. So it's like the secret history mixed with like YA fantasy or with fantasy, and seems like romance stuff is coming up too. So that's what I've been enjoying. My most recent throwback, I honestly have mostly been doing comfort reads for like 2 years. But my brain is like, look. But my most recent one was Saving Grace by Julie Garwood. I got the audiobook of it, and it's I don't even know what year it was published, but it's one of my favorite. It's medieval historical, with like, a Scottish laird who takes a wife. And okay, I'm gonna say I'm not sure because I didn't listen to the first chapter. The age stuff might be very strange. It was a medieval written a long time ago. I don't know how old the heroine is supposed to be. I'm going to put that out there right now. When I read it, she's just a grown-ass woman. I do not know.
You're like 12. You're like,
My brain is like, hop over that. This might be a little weird, but that's one of my comfort reads. All right, I'm gonna go back to the questions now. Let's see. Um, a romantic trope that you don't. Okay, I'm gonna sum. This is from Sil. Hi, Sil. What's one romantic trope that you don't like to read, and have you read a book that has that trope that you have completely loved, even though it's a trope you dislike?
Mm,
I
mhm.
think.
Actually,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, since she's not here, but I feel like I want to give a shout out to her. I would say I'm not a big fan of, I don't know if it's like, if it's accurate, but it's like, and maybe this isn't a trope, I don't know, but it's like the widower slash, arranged marriage kind of situation. I'm kind of like, and then if you add kids, I'm like, oh no, and I'm not interested, and I pass on that kind of book typically. But um, I read Tempest by Beverly Jenkins,
Love
and
that book.
it just threw everything out the water. And I was like, who cares? Like, I love this trope. And, I will read every book that has this trope. And actually, that's probably not the case, because the reason why I love it is because it is in the hands of Miss Bev. And so, she does everything so masterfully that I fell in love with it. But that was one of those books, like, I think Regan Carmichael, who is the heroine of that book, is probably one of my favorite
Yeah.
heroines
I love her.
ever. And so, and I just was like, it's a book with like a kid in it. Oh, and I always like, whenever there are books with kids, and I'm like, no, I have kids, I don't want to see them.
Wow.
But like, she did it so well. Like, I mean, and the kid wasn't like, a plot moppet. Like, she had a role in the book, and they had a really, like, even an arc in terms of their
Yeah.
relationship and all of this. So yes, I mean, there have been, tropes where I'm kind of like, but that is one of those books where I was like, it's Miss Bev, whatever.
Okay, so mine is also a book by Miss Bev. Well, I have two. And one of my questions was actually going to be, what is everyone's favorite Miss Bev book? Everyone doesn't have to reply with the Miss Bev book right now, but if we want to talk about that later. But so mine is Secret Baby. I often have trouble with it, but I have two books that I enjoy with the Secret Baby trope. One is Destiny Surrender. The
Yes.
second book
Yes.
is
That movie's
a really big
so
hit.
good.
Love it.
That whole series is amazing. Book two, that you're like, all right. I was like, I usually am like, I don't, why didn't you tell it? But like you said, it's knows what she's doing.
Right.
The other Secret Baby book is Zenny, in which the heroine is the secret baby. And so I love that play on the trope. So yes.
I love tropes. I guess because I don't know if this is a trope or not, but I don't like it when they're like overly mean to each other. This is kind of like piggyback off of what Mia was saying earlier, like this almost like a bully. I'm starting to see a trend for
Yeah.
that. It just pisses me off, so I just closed the book. But to focus on a positive note, so I was going to say, yeah, Miss Bev's Destiny Surrender. And then just how it starts off, I was like, oh snap! Like the first scene, I'm like, what? I thought this was like a little tame historical, and I just looked around like, am I allowed? Oh man, loved. And I was like, okay, page turner. And then Indigo is one of my faves as well. Yeah.
Confession, I've never read Indigo.
I haven't read Indigo either. I've been reading her books out of order, and I'm holding on to Indigo.
Okay. I feel better about that now. Okay.
No.
I did spend like an ungodly amount of money on a hardcover version of Indigo.
Ooh.
I'm
Yeah,
collecting
I love.
books right now. So my roommate has a Nora Roberts shelf, and I have a Bev Jenkins shelf. So we're collecting the books. But I'm reading Bev out of order. So there's some of her books I haven't read. Those are my like ultimate comfort reads. So I'm like hoarding them for like the right one. My favorite recent Miss Bev book, because I really haven't read a book of hers that I don't like, was Topaz. I read that most recently, other than Rebel, because that was the most recent one she's had out. But and Topaz was just good. Oh, that was just. I love a road trip, and I love a road trip with boning, and that was great.
I see. This is the thing.
I think that's a book cover blurb right there.
Are so sexy. So, speaking of Tempest, when I was reading Tempest, I was like, these people have not had sex in the bed yet over the course of the book.
Right.
Yeah, and she had commented that people were like, oh, there's not that much sex in Forbidden, and she's like, I got these people humping in all these other books, and then I don't. As far as tropes go, my time is very, very precious. So if something is something that I really don't like, I don't really bother with it. There's very few tropes that I'm not willing to give a try from particular authors. I'm not a huge fan of enemies to lovers, again, if people are mean, but I read this book recently by Mia Sosa that I thought was pretty good. I feel like the one trope I really, really hate, and I don't think it actually comes up in romance that much, is love triangles. I feel like that comes up more in YA romance, which makes more sense because I feel like when you are in high school, everyone's just kind of figuring it out. I feel like it's a little bit different when you're an adult. So it makes a little bit more sense in YA, but I think love triangles are the one thing I try and stay away from. But I don't feel like a lot of my favorite authors write actual love triangles where it's like 2 people or 3 people really trying to sort it out. But everything else, I'll try it if I trust the author, if I'm looking for something new. I guess I'm like in the minority, or I don't know, maybe it's not a minority. Maybe we're a silent majority. Like, I love a secret baby trope. Because I feel like I'm reading a work of fiction. Like in real life, it's like, well, actually, let me back it all the way up. In real life, people have secret babies all the time. I know so many. I mean, come on, there's 3 in my family alone. Like people have secret babies all the time, so it's not really unbelievable trope. And a lot of people like to say, oh, don't you want to get, checks and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, but sometimes you get knocked up by some bum you don't want to talk to, and then you just go about your business. All the time. And especially for Black people who have like just a messy history of family connections, like people will just be giving people babies, and you're like, oh, your genealogy doesn't match up. Well, that's because your Uncle Raymond wasn't actually your uncle. He was some kid down the street who we just took in. Like, so I love a good secret baby trope. That's the hill I will die on. Me and my secret baby.
Okay, I will no longer disrespect the secret baby. So you have changed my life. Okay, I'm gonna look at the point
where this conversation went off the rails.
I do. So
I love it.
I just want to talk about one Miss Bev thing that if she'd been here, I wanted to talk to her about, but I don't know if everyone knows this because she recently had an interview with the New York Times, and which was amazing, and they were asking her about what she would write, and I believe she said fantasy. But so this is like a B-side. If you get the Blessings, she has her Blessings series. There's been a novella called Crystal Clear. And at the end of Crystal Clear is a short fantasy historical called Transformation.
Really?
So if you want to read a Beverly Jenkins fantasy, you should buy Crystal Clear. And it's very good.
Yay.
And I'm talking about it because I want everyone to read it, and I want her to write more fantasy.
Read.
Nice.
So, okay.
There's a reason why. She's here in spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have my
I have
Slayer
her poster
words.
behind me. I don't know if you can see.
I know. We can see it. It's great.
Can you all see the questions? Because
No.
there's some. Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. Hold on, let me see.
Let's see. There's okay. Do. Let's see. Who were your favorite characters to write, and who were the hardest?
Oof.
Mhm.
Let's see. My favorite, probably Johan. It's hard because when you're writing, each person can be your favorite at certain points. Um,
Right.
but Johan and A Prince on Paper, and least or the hardest was Daniel and Unconditional Freedom. But Johan was fun. I mean, he had his. They both are angsty, but they process it in different ways, which made one more fun to write and one more difficult to write.
For me, I think the most fun, I'll say couple to write was Kira and Daniel and Saded. Kira was super fun. I got to write a black geek girl and just make her super nerdy. And Daniel's probably like maybe the sexiest hero I've written. People seem to like him quite a bit. And then I think the hardest was my last paranormal lesbian book, Soul to Keep, because I brought together two characters from previous books who everybody hated. And that's kind of why I brought them together. I was like, let me find these like, two super annoying people and put them together and make them fall in love. And in my mind, it was like genius. And then I was like, oh no, I have to write two super annoying people and make them likable. And that was really difficult. And the reviews show themselves on Amazon.
I can't with you.
It happens. It happens. I won an award for that book, though, so whatever. Anyway.
Who wants to, I'll go next.
Okay.
Let's see. Favorite character to write, I would say is Eva, who is the heroine in Crashing Into Her, the third book in the Love on Q series. She just has this joyful quality, and she was so damn funny. And she came into the series at the very beginning in book one, and kind of every time she was on the page, she leapt off it. And so, like, I had to tell her story. And just every time I was writing her, even in the other books, I was happy. It was just like she made me happy. And I would say the hardest character I've ever written is actually Lena in The Worst Best Man. And I think it's because she is very much like me. And I had to pull back and sort of not make this like Mia Sosa on the page, but have her be her own character. And so there were times where I was like, okay, wait a minute. That's what you would do. That's not what she would do. And I had to kind of separate them. But also I think she did have experiences that were similar to mine. And so writing about those experiences, the sort of sense of like, how do I act in public? How do I comport myself, and what does that say about me and others? And just there was a whole lot that was wrapped in to her character, just because I know what that's like as a woman of color navigating life. And I think that really made it like I felt like there were a lot of emotions that I was going through as I was writing her character that I haven't fully explored in the other characters that I've written. So she was a challenge, but I mean, I love her dearly. So it turned out okay in the end.
Thank you. And that question was from Natalie. I didn't say it before. Now we have a question from Christine. How do you balance what you want society to be versus depicting the reality of the world we live in versus social commentary into your works, especially given romance is happily ever after happy for now?
Sharina, jump in there, girl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because this is yeah. I think the women's fiction with romantic elements is what I'm called. Well, it's what it's called, but it allowed me to explore that a bit more, and I felt like I depicted the world as it was, and through the lens of a Black woman, and how it is. You know, tried to have those interesting careers. Is like, okay, who are you in public? You know, at work, how others perceive you, code switching is a part of that. The layer of being who you are versus being a parent, which is so, definitely something I'm exploring right now. So yeah, I think women's fiction allowed me to do that, but you can certainly do that in romance as well. But yeah, I try in this book. I tried to make it as realistic as possible because in my head I had a specific message about drop out everyone else's baggage, self-care, pursue your dreams relentlessly. And because I wanted to drive that message home, I really did try to make it as without banging people over the head. At least I tried as realistic as possible. But yeah, it was definitely a balancing act because there's so many different layers of who we are as people, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
Definitely.
Yeah.
I
I think, oh, you go.
I was gonna say, yeah, I try to bang people over the head with it in some books a little bit. In Rafe, I really tried to drive home the point, when they're not busy having sex. I was trying to drive home the point that Sloan was looking for. If you haven't read Rafe, sorry, let me back it up. It's about a Black woman who's a child genius, basically, who has become a surgeon, and she's got twin daughters, and she needs to find a nanny to look after them. So she ends up hiring this hot male nanny a buff male nanny, if you will, to look after her kids. And they end up falling in love. And before they even meet, she really needs to find um, someone who she feels comfortable raising her Black children. And she says that very plainly, like, your political views matter to me. Your views on race matter to me. I can't have you around my kids saying, casually racist things or just being a bigot in front of my children. Like, that's not going to work. And they need to be safe to be who they are as young Black girls. And she finds someone who is very good at that job, and then at the same time is very um, good at least. I mean, obviously, he doesn't understand what it's like to be a Black woman, but his stepmother is the Black woman, and she is drilled into his head like, listen, one, you're going to respect women, period, and you're going to understand that Black women are navigating this world in a different way. And Mia does this very well with Max in her book as well, having a white character at least take a step back and say, okay, I don't actually understand what this feels like, but let me pay attention and show up. And Alyssa, I mean, you do this really well, and um, your books as well. In your first Loyalist book, you Loyalty book, sorry, you have a Scottish hero who has to get into it. I mean, he is not standing back and saying like, oh, this war is bad, but I'm just gonna see how it plays out. Like, he really has to step in there and really show up. And I think that's you can write a really compelling story and still have relevant issues, with your characters.
Mia? Alyssa? Oh.
I can know. I just didn't.
You were about to talk. I'll just say really quickly that I think in my head, the important thing is by the end of the story, I want the reader to believe in the happily ever after. I want the reader to be able to picture these two people together somewhere, navigating life together and having that work out. And I don't think in any of my books, there isn't, at least, I think that at least in all of my books, there is some acknowledgement of kind of what's going on in the world, or because there's a person of color involved in these interracial relationships, there's some acknowledgement that, as Rebekah said, that character is navigating the world differently. And I always try and at least put in some kind of conversation where they talk about that. And it's not the focus of the book, but it is something that a reader can point to and say, okay, they can communicate about this. Yeah. Because I think if you can communicate about it, then you'll be able to navigate it in whatever circumstance you'll deal with in the future. And I think that's the goal. The goal is, do you see these two people down the road being able to handle these issues? And I think a lot of times you just want to make sure that they're on the same page about certain issues. And, a snippet here and a snippet there, I think can definitely capture that.
Yeah, and that question was from Christine, by the way. I guess for me, yeah, I agree with what everyone has said. Also, I have run into this problem a couple of times, or a few times, where I was just talking with a friend about this, where like with one of the problem I had with my last book was like, okay, it's a romance, but also I'm trying to solve good governance, and like I can't solve that in real life either. But I'm sitting here as
right.
as like
right.
Yeah.
like okay, if I just get it right in this book, then so because like with the reluctant royals and runaway royals, to some extent, part of the fantasy is having people in power who actually are empathetic and care about the people around them and the people that they have power over. So like one of the things I really was grappling with How to Catch a Queen is like, it's this kingdom that's kind of, and it was also related to like the RWA issue. I'm not going to get into all of that, but like when something is really an organization or a government is really entrenched in a certain behavior, how do you make them change and make it a happily ever after? And like eventually, I figured it out, because I can do whatever I want in the book, and it's
right.
not reality. I realized that like that part didn't have to be super realistic. But yeah, I think it can, that's one of the cool things that we get to do in our books, is take social issues, introduce them even to a greater or lesser degree, and then figure out how to make that work for the characters and for the people in the world in a way that's satisfying to the reader. So in addition to the romance, they get to see this part of things that is like kind of unsatisfactory in the real world being dealt with and addressed, and they get to be happy about that too on some level. So it's 7:19 now. Let me see what other questions we have. Tricky. Well, I think we should start wrapping it up. I actually have no idea how long this is supposed to go for, but like I don't want to hold you hostage all night. Like, this is fun, guys. So I think, let's see, some of these questions we have answered. If you want to, one of the questions I saw there was like, has your writing process changed over the last few months of quarantine? Although that affects people differently. For me, it has not, because I am a hermit living in my house. So I just don't go to the supermarket or anywhere anymore.
Yeah, it hasn't changed for me either. I usually write most days with Sarah Kuhn, who's also a local kick-ass, awesome romance and comics author. Her and I usually write together somewhere, so I haven't seen her in a long time, and the withdrawal is real. But usually I'm just at home, and before the quarantine, my agent and I plotted out the 6 books I'm trying to write this year, and that has not changed. So I'm still cranking away on double deadlines right now. So no, nothing has changed. Just a little, like crying like a little bit more than usual.
Yeah. More random crying.
Yeah.
I will confess that it's been a hard couple of months getting this book finished, but I finally did it. I think in part it's that my mother went to Brazil a couple of months ago, and I'm sort of still trying to figure out how she's going to get back. It's hopefully next week. And so that's been on my mind. And so, like, you know, anything that I see about kind of what's going on makes me think about her in a place where I can't get to her. Yeah. And so it's been like, and so today turning in this book really was a triumph for me. I was like, finally, like, let me just get this out, because all I want to do is read books and watch TV and not think about writing. I think that's what I need right now. So it's been an interesting couple of months. Plus I have my kids all day. That is not how I usually write.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun with the 2-year-old around. Jeez. I would say I've been writing it's going to sound like I'm all over the place. So yeah, maybe, but a paranormal for the past months. Yeah, Vampire Slayer series. I'm excited. It's the story. It's the story of my heart. But it's been a great distraction. I've honestly had a lot of anxiety of releasing a book right now during this time. I've had a lot of ups and downs, but I've had some great author friends who have rallied around me, just gave me the kick in the pants that I needed to get over myself. And but the paranormal, pivoting to paranormal has been great because I have a sense of control that I don't have in the real world, and I can make my own rules and I can do my own thing. So it's been a welcome reprieve, and I've just been, focused on that.
Well, I think all of us are just really excited to read this paranormal.
Yeah. I turned it. The agent has been blessed by the agent, so we'll see what happens. But
great.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Woo-hoo. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that was everyone. I guess maybe one of the last things. If you have any last questions, send it now. But I'm gonna ask: what have you been watching? We talked about what have you been reading. If you have any recommendations for, and this is just because I want to tell everyone to watch Crash Landing on You.
I've been reading your tweets. This is my cue now.
Yeah.
My mom, I was talking to my mom and she was like, "What is that show you keep tweeting about?" And I was like, you saw the tweet, so you did. But I feel like every time I talk to her, she mentions a tweet, like to be like, "I'm watching."
I know what you're tweeting about.
But yeah, Crash Landing on You is a very good distraction for anyone who needs it.
I've been watching. I got Disney Plus. I have like every app. Like I came out here to do TV, so like I'm super invested in media. So I have like every app you can have. So I have a Disney Plus, and I've actually been watching the DuckTales reboot, which is amazing. One episode they're trying to stop a supervillain, and the whole plot is that she's been trying to make gummy berry juice, and so they put that little they put that in there for the adults who used to watch gummy bears, and it was like really, really funny. So I've been watching that, and that's been really good. And then I've just been kind of jumping. I watch a lot of true crime stuff, so I've been jumping around watching like weird true crime shows on Investigation Discovery.
Does the DuckTales show have the theme song, the original?
Yeah, they redid the original theme song with different singers, but it's the same. It's like the same song. Okay. It's good. It's very good. And if you have fans of Doctor Who, David Tennant does Scrooge McDuck's voice, and he does a really good job. The cast is fantastic. They did a really good job with it.
Cute. Well, I've been writing, and so since I can't focus on anything that's series based, I kind of I'm really into like competition shows. So I've been watching like Top Chef and The Voice, and I love Songland. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this show, but it's basically like songwriters who go through the process and they basically pitch a musician with their songs, and you see the process. And I think maybe it's because I'm an author and I know the process of writing. It's really cool to sort of see how a song starts and what they do to it in order to make it commercially viable. And then, it's always cool to see somebody kind of have their dreams come true, basically have like a huge star record their songs. So I've been really into that. And I have the entire last season of Schitt's Creek that I have not seen.
Okay.
And so now that I have turned in this book, that is the next thing on my list. And after that is Crash Landing on You, and only because I saw your tweets.
You should get a kickback for that. Like I'm gonna watch it because of you.
Mia, when you were saying you were finally gonna watch the last season, I was like, I hope she doesn't say Game of Thrones.
Oh no.
It's like, oh.
No, I have already been disappointed by that. So.
Oh, that's good. So, hey, it's Band-Aid, rip it. For me, I've been watching My Hollow Love. It's cute. Yeah. So I'm going to watch Crash Landing after My Hollow. And I just finished up, I think it's Kingdom. It's a zombie K-drama. So guys, it's so good. If you're into zombies.
I want to watch it, but it looks scary.
It is scary.
It is scary in the best way possible. And dang, what's the other? I just started watching. I think it's Never Have I Ever. That's produced by Mindy Kaling, and it's super cute. It's so cute. So yeah.
Sharina, what was the first thing you said?
Was it My Hollow Love?
Yeah, My Hollow Love.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm taking notes.
Yes.
I think so. The guy, it's like a hologram. She falls in love with.
Yes.
Right up your alley.
They do a lot of hologram sex. It's just kind of go transparent. Just kind of go through them.
I started the drama I'm watching right now is an older one. Well, not that much older. It's a couple years old, called K2. And I was sending Rebekah screenshots yesterday because it's like a bodyguard romance. I guess the romance hasn't started yet. But there was a scene with like a bunch of dudes naked in a shower room, and then they just have like a full-on battle naked. It's called K2.
Okay.
There's like martial arts and also naked shower battles. If anyone needs that in their lives, I think
it's a.
If anyone really wants to shut their brain off, but also have like the perfect white noise, if you have Hulu, there are like probably at this point 200 episodes of the British Love Island up there, and that is a great waste of time.
Ooh.
I wrote like 4 books watching Love Island, so just put it on, fold your laundry, get lost in the messiness. It's amazing.
Okay, so with that, I think we can wrap things up. Thank you to our dates for the night. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for coming, watching, joining, and commenting. And so have a great weekend, have a great night, and good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.